right, let me be honest with you. The world is, we'll just say, chaotic right now. Massive layoffs, restructuring, AI is reshaping entire industries, the whole economy, the government. I mean, it's crazy, right? So if you've ever thought, I should probably get serious about my career, yeah, that moment is now, my friend. And no one says it's better than today's guest, Erika Ayers Badan. She is the author of Nobody Cares About Your Career. Because it's true. No one is coming to save you. No one is handing you your dream job. And no one's going to care about your success more than you. So what do? Well, you take ownership. You stop waiting and you get intentional. What I love about this conversation is Erika breaks it all down. 5 simple things that actually move the needle. Put in the work. Always be learning. Build a network that stretches you. Make time to think. And have a vision for your life. So this episode is your toolkit for not just surviving a rocky job market, but standing out, showing up, and building something that's yours. We get into everything: how to stay grounded when layoffs hit, how to protect your time and energy, and how to own your value and ask the real questions like, am I doing what I'm actually getting paid to do? Yeah, this is the mindset shift for your career and your bank account. This is what you've been waiting for. All right, let's get into it. So in your new book, which I love the title, by the way, Nobody Cares About Your Career,
Thank you.
say that succeeding at work is based on 5 simple things. I think we need to start here. Tell me what these 5 things are.
Oh my gosh, you're like making me go back into the archives of what's in this book. I think succeeding at work is simpler than people think, right? So you've got to be willing to put in the work first and foremost, which is a lot of what this book is about in terms of putting away your ego and getting over your insecurity and just showing up. I also think you need to always be learning, which is a huge premise of the book at large. And I'll kind of paraphrase the 5, but what I really believe is that people learn in all different types of ways. And a lot of times our ego, which is we don't have anything to learn, or our insecurity, which is people are going to find out I'm stupid, keep us from putting ourselves out there. So one of the things is that I really emphasize is go find somebody who doesn't do the same thing you do, doesn't think the way you do, doesn't have the same skill set you do. For me, it was always the finance person, right? I went to a liberal arts college. I wasn't great at math. I always wanted to find the finance guy or girl, take them for a cup of coffee and say, tell me everything you know. How do you see the world versus how I see the world? So the first piece is really putting yourself in a position to learn from other people. You can also learn a lot from observing people, and you can learn a lot from reading. So the other piece I talk about in the book as it relates to learning is you don't have to be an extrovert to learn. I think there's this bias that you're supposed to be good with people and you've got to put yourself out there. You can learn just by watching YouTube. And so don't put too much pressure on yourself that you have to learn a certain way. The second is, it is really the doing. It is really making sure that you are, asking the questions, which I think are really foundational and basic, but what is my boss paying me to do? A lot of times people at work, I think, get confused or distracted by everything happening on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you get kind of caught up in the drama or the bright, shiny object. And people lose sight of what am I being paid to do? And answering the question, am I doing that? So the second is the doing. I'm a New England Patriots fan, and it's like the Bill Belichick, like, do your job, just do your job. It's like Michelle Obama at the DNC, like do something, just like do something. So the second piece is the doing. It's applying yourself. It's staying focused. It's staying, deliberate about what you're doing. I also really believe that networking is important. And I don't mean networking in you had to go to some fancy business school and a lot of rich people who are wealthy and know how to do a lot of things. It's making human connections and taking people at their face value and being so open to what can you understand from everyone, just putting yourself out there. I think a lot of times people tend to hide themselves and people tend to be afraid to just put yourself out there, just say, hey, I'm Erica. I might have food in my teeth, but I have a big smile and it's nice to meet you. What do you do? So that's a big piece. And then the other two are really, I think it's very easy to get distracted in the doing so that you're not spending time thinking. And you need to carve time to think. You've got to think about what's happening in the world around you. You have to think about what's happening in your company. You should be thinking about what makes you happy and, are you fulfilled? Are you on the track you want to be on? So really not sparing on the time for thinking. I write in the book about this gentleman who I have a huge amount of respect for, one of the greats ever in the media, advertising, marketing business. Um, and what he does is he doesn't talk to anyone before 11 a.m. any day of the week. And he spends between 9 and 11 reading. And I always was like, God, that's a crazy amount of time. And he's like, it's essential because I'm learning, I'm thinking, I'm processing. So really making sure you make time to think. And then I think the last big piece is you really have to have a vision for who you are and what you can be in life and at work. And your vision should keep you focused and keep you positive and keep you motivated to cut through the grind that is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Thursday, Monday. It keeps you going especially when you don't want to.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for
That was a lot.
unpacking. Thank you for unpacking all of that. That's like the good juicy bits. And since I'm a money person, I guess we could hang out and have coffee. You could pick
Yes,
my brain all day long.
I will like you. I would like to have coffee with you.
I talk a lot about money mindset, valuing your worth, remembering who you are, even if you made a mistake or no matter where you came from, how you were raised, all that kind of stuff. But I'm curious tell me about a career mindset, right? How do we toe the line between like being a valuable employee, but also like having a life and being a whole person and somebody that doesn't want to get, sucked in at work, but obviously we got to go to work, we got to earn money, all that. Like, how do we find that balance?
Yeah, it's super hard. I tend to think balance is kind of bullshit, where it's like just one of those words that just makes you feel badly about yourself because it
You
doesn't
can
matter
never
how
get
good
there.
you never get there. Like you're never going to get there. And if you are there, then you're just going to want something else. So I tend to think about it. I love the idea of a money mindset. I love how you talk about a money mindset. I didn't come from very much. My family didn't have money. I was the first person in my entire extended family who ever worked in a city. So it's like, I think understanding where you come from inside of you is really, really important, both in what you value around money and how you manage your own money and why you want the money. I think that's a big piece. Your career is this exact same thing, right? Where a lot of times people want a career because it looks good to someone else. And that's really why I talk about nobody cares about your career, because I think that's just an insanely unfulfilling way to live, which is the idea that you should be this because someone who you think is talking about you and thinking about you and judging you thinks you should be that. So I don't really believe in that. I think there's a lot of people who get caught up in the ego of it all. My title is this. I worked at this place. I manage this many people. I more so come at it probably similar to how you think about money from the other side, which is, what do you stand for? Who are you inside? What is it that you can learn and do better? And how can you constantly be in a place where you are learning and getting better? And I think every job is like that and every career is like that. I think a lot of times people want stability, people want certainty, people want predictability, which obviously you do want in money. I think that's where a career is very different, which is sometimes you should just throw it all out there and see what can come of it. Um, I had an interesting Q&A question. People DM me questions all the time about work, which was part of the reason I wrote the book. And today's question was, I want to work less. Should I tell my company I'm willing to take a pay cut to do that? And I was like, God, that's an interesting question. And my first instinct was like, don't offer the pay cut. Just set some
Right.
boundaries of what you're going to do at work. So I do think, I think work-life balance is a hard thing to navigate. I tend to think about it more as being present, right? You want to be present at work. You want to be present in your bank account. You want to be present in your family, and you want to be present for yourself. And if you can kind of rotate around those things, you'll be okay.
And I feel like that's such an interesting question that you bring up, because I feel like when we talk about work and then we also talk about money, there's a lot of fear that
Hmm.
people have around asking for a raise, questions like that. Like, do I offer to take less?
Yeah.
Do I not? And I feel like there's already like so much shame and emotion around money. It's so complex. And then when we put it into the career landscape, I think especially for women, it
Yeah.
can be really challenging. Like, you don't know when to say what. You don't know if you should fight for a raise, not fight for a raise. Should you leave this job? Should you go to a new job? Like, there's so many questions around that. Can you give us any guidance, like for the person listening who's like, oh my gosh, yes, I just feel like a shit show when I'm thinking about money and work. How do we figure this out?
It's so hard because there is so much packed in there that nobody talks about, right? Insecurity, vulnerability, what your childhood was like, or where you came. Like, there's all this, it's a snowball of stuff you'd rather not think about. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
so I think that's what makes money very funny, and also makes work really funny. And funny, I mean awkward and weird. Um, it's funny. I have this happen a lot. I just had this happen. I hired someone quite senior in my company, and the job was listed at a certain salary band, and this person was over the salary band. And the person verbally accepted the job. And then the person came back and said, I'd like the salary to be 20% higher.
Mm.
And it was a woman. And I was working through the hiring, the HR people, and I was like, like, we're already outside of our budget. Like, we can't go up 20%. And what was interesting about it is it happened over email. And then the person wrote a follow-up email that said, I'm sorry. I feel so awkward about this. I really want this
Ooh.
job. I feel like I might have overstepped, but I'm really bad at negotiating my worth. And to me, that is the crux of, like, what is your worth in your head and in your bank account and in your life? And what is that number that you just have to have? And are you willing? It's like selling a house. You can sell your house at the price you want, but it might not be on the timetable you want, or you got to bring the price down so somebody buys it. And, or selling anything really, it doesn't have to be a house. But it was, sorry, I'm rambling, but like, I thought it was an interesting thing where in hindsight, if I were that person, I would have said, hey, I got to be at a total comp of blank to take this job
Right. Beforehand, right?
beforehand. And know that by saying that number, you might not get this job. And that is really I wish people, or would hope for people, that they make that decision in their head before they go into the negotiation process. This is the number I need to be at. And we can get creative about how we get there. Is it equity? Is it a bonus? Is it your base? It took me a long time to learn that. This job, to be honest with you, is probably, I'm in my like late 40s, is the first job that I went into where I said, I need to make this. And I'm willing to get super creative in terms of how we get to this, but this is the number that I need. And obviously, like, I've had, I had more leverage, I had more experience. Like, there's all these caveats. But one good thing to do, I think, is to say, here's it's kind of like a base case, a low case, a base case, and a great case. What's your low case number? What's your base case number? What's your want? What's your dream number? And before you go into a job companies have to post what a job pays at this point. So there's no surprises. Go in with, am I going at the base? Am I going a little bit below the base? Or am I going for the whole enchilada? And if you go into that, then I think you feel more empowered in the process.
I like that. I like that way of thinking about it. Because you're right. I mean, I can see her sending the email, being a little bit nervous
And
after
then be like,
putting that out.
what if they rip
Yeah.
the job
But
away?
then you're thinking like, well, does it feel amateurish to
Yeah.
then send an email saying
Yeah.
like there just never feels like the right thing?
And everything feels like the wrong thing. It's like, and it's all your insecurity. Do you know what I mean? It's just, and
1,000%.
everybody has insecurity. Everybody has insecurity about money. Nobody's paying as close of attention to their money as they should, in my opinion. I know one person in my life who pays that much attention to money. Everyone else is a disaster. And it's kind of the same in a career, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you draw those parallels. I want to talk a little bit about the like current kind of work environment we're in because I know it's topsy-turvy. There's companies that are wanting employees to go back, full time. Or I go back in the
Yeah.
office, I should say. And then there's other companies that are like, no, we're, stay at home, do all that. Then there's companies that are having layoffs. I mean, it's just, there's always a news story. And you say that there are things you should not ask when your company is forcing layoffs, when they're going through
Mhm.
layoffs. I think this is really interesting. I want to talk about this a bit because I would imagine that a lot of us probably say the wrong things in those situations. Like, what should we avoid if we're in that? Because it's already a stressful, heightened environment. Nobody wants to be in that position, but it happens.
Definitely. So, what I write about in the book, and again, I am just one person's opinion, and this is just my perspective from my career. But when there's about to be a layoff, very few people know how many people are impacted. I sat on this plane to Canada last week. I couldn't believe this. So I sat on the plane, and there was, when you're on the plane and it's a very small plane and there's that person who's talking way too loudly and to strangers.
Yes.
So there was this lady on the plane, and the lady on the plane was just like yapping, yapping, yapping. And she was like, what did she say? She said, I'm a change management person. And she said, and she's talking to a stranger, which is the lady next to her. And she said, oh, I'm in change management. And the lady next to her says politely, like, what's change management? And the lady is like, oh, perhaps you've heard of the, I don't know, thousands of people that have gotten laid off from Nike. I was part of that. And she was talking so loudly and also so proudly about thousands of jobs that she helped eliminate at Nike. And then she was like, what's your name? To the lady, like, it just was a bizarre conversation amongst strangers. But the reason I share that story is there is somebody who doesn't care about you as a human being or where you came from or what you have going on outside of work or how expensive your life is or how good you are at your job, that is doing the math on what the P&L of the company should be and how many employees that indicates and how many jobs will need to be eliminated. So I think one thing that happens in a layoff environment is you start asking everyone around you, do you think I'm going to get laid off? Would you think you're going to get laid off? Like, are you safe? Am I safe? I don't like that because I think it's embarrassing, because the reality is you don't know. Your boss probably doesn't know. Your coworkers definitely don't know. And if they do know, they're not going to tell you. So it's a lose-lose, you know? So from my opinion, or in my opinion, the best thing to do if there's rumblings of a layoff, and there will always be rumblings of layoffs in and around companies, it's just like, get your shit together. Like, is your resume up to date? Do you have a life raft? Like, if this thing imploded tomorrow, what would you do? What costs would you cut? What companies would you reach out to? Is there a side gig that you would lean on? Is there an old boss who you would reach out to? It's almost like, speaking of the plane analogies, it's like, in case of emergency, you're going to go down the slide. You're going to put the mask on yourself first. Like, you got to have that plan for yourself instead of worrying or basing your decisions on the gossip of what everyone else is saying.
I like that analogy of the plane.
Mhm.
Yeah, right. You've got to have your
You
life
got to put the
vest.
mask on.
You got to put the mask on. Yeah, you got to get a few things in
Yep.
order. I think that's important, even if you think there might be a chance of
Oh, you
layoffs.
should.
And
I think it's a good thing to do. One thing I write about a lot in the book, having been through a lot of layoffs, having done a lot of layoffs, is the best time to plan for a crisis is when you are not in a crisis. So I think it's like great to be like, all right, it's January 1st or it's September 15th or whatever the date is. I'm going to spend 2 hours on this date just thinking through the what if. If I got laid off, what would I do? Um, I am, I think Barbara Corcoran gave me this phrase once, which was like successfully insecure. I'm a successfully insecure person. So I'm always like, well, what if this job doesn't work out? What would I do? Would I do this? Would I do that? Would I do? And probably I'm a crazy person. I should, I'm crazy. So I like maybe shouldn't be spending so much time thinking about it. But I do think just the forcing yourself to think about this conclusion is motivating to figure out, okay, what would the pivots you make? What would those be? What would those things do? What are those things you could do? And I think it's just a really healthy, it takes the fear out of it all.
I feel like this is the central thesis of your book. Tell me about, because I would imagine you have experienced so much in your very successful career. Like, how did you get to the point where you're like, I need to write a book about this? The fact that nobody's coming to save you. You better figure it out yourself.
Um, I think I got here the same way in my career. It was kind of like a roundabout, strange way. And I think, one thing is, before I wrote the book, I went to the bookstore and I looked at all the business books, and I like really truly couldn't have been more bored or intimidated, I guess I would say. Like, I really looked at business books, and in my mind, I broke them into two categories. It's either the, hey, I'm perfect and have done something you're never going to do. My big fat head is on the cover. And the second is, like, I'm so great. And kind of preachy, like, I'm so great. And then the other side of it was you got to do these 5 things. And if you have the self discipline to make these habits or changes, or like the trick, it was all about the trick. And I am a person who's wildly disciplined and has absolutely no willpower and discipline at all. And I don't feel like I have anything to preach about. And there's no chance in hell that I'm going to stick to the like 3 things I'm supposed to do every day. So I felt like there was this gap of somebody who's in their career making a ton of mistakes, trying to figure things out, working, and who wants to bring people along for the ride as I am, in a flawed, you know, chaotic, interesting kind of way. So that was my first thing. The second thing was, I was getting all of these DMs where people were having work questions, and I kind of thought to myself, like, it'd be more efficient if I would just answer these once in a more cohesive format than me being on the train on my phone and people's DMs, which is, I still spend my time on the phone, on the train, and people's DMs. So I wrote the book predominantly on my phone on the train, and I wrote it also because I was at a time in my own career where, we had just sold Barstool Sports to Penn National, and my job was really changing. And I had had this job that was wild and free and so creative and consuming and uncharted. And then the record scratched in a, and there are really amazing things that come from being acquired. But for anyone who has gone through an acquisition, the record scratches and you get a boss and you have to fit somebody else's framework and you got to start doing the TPS reports. And in my case, I just show up at these offsites that would last for hours with PowerPoints and strategery. And I was like, oh, I like miss the fun. And I was feeling very emotional about it and very frustrated about it. And writing the book became like the creative outlet where I felt more connected to, it sounds cheesy, but like my joy at work.
No, I think there's probably a lot of people that can relate to that. I think there are so many companies being bought by other companies. I know I've had a lot of friends who, um, suddenly their company's acquired, and then it's the question of, are they still going to be able to make the same money? Is there now there's two people
Yes.
doing that job, like which one goes, which one stays? And it's so crazy how work culture is. And that's what
Yep.
I think is so great about a book like this is you're leaning into like, this is nuts all the way
It's
around.
crazy. Like I had someone here today and we were talking about the For the Girls chapter. So I wrote this chapter called For the Girls, which really isn't for girls, it's for everybody. But, it's about sexual harassment. It's about discrimination. It's about, what do you do when you're pregnant at work or you've just had a baby? And what do you do about all the stuff that's never said? Like work is for now, like full of humans, and humans are incredibly dysfunctional and inconsistent and, rude and stupid and brilliant and funny. And so long as work is full of that, work is going to be weird. And, but I really believe that work is a way to change your life. My work has changed my life in a incredible, incredible way. And I wish everyone that happiness of, wow, I became something that I didn't know was possible. And I still don't know what I'm going to do next or be next. But I've really loved the journey of learning and failing and being. And I wish that for people in their careers.
I want to end here. How do we do this? Like, how do we care more about our career? How do we take back some of that power that we've given to our company, to our bosses, to this fear about money and advancing and titles and all of these things that we get tripped up? How do we today take back some of that ownership?
I think what's important is to figure out what you care about. You know, I didn't grow up with money and I always wanted clothing. Like liked clothing. And so from the minute I was 14 years old, it was like if I wanted to buy a shirt at TJ Maxx, which I did, I had to work. And I hated the like snot-nosed little kids that I babysat, like they were nightmares. And I was probably a crappy babysitter, but I learned how to get better at it and I learned how to enjoy my time doing it. Side note, if you get a babysitting job, there's probably nobody who's listening to this who does babysitting, but you got to clean the kitchen. Like that to me, like I would get the kids to bed and then I would just clean the kitchen and I got asked back all the time because I cleaned the kitchen. Um, yeah, insider tip, clean the kitchen if you're a babysitter. But, the time I spent doing it and the Friday nights that I missed and the parties I didn't get to go to and the dates I didn't go on was worth it to me because I knew what I wanted out of it. Um, I wanted to live in a city. I wanted to live in New York City. And I knew that, all right, I'm going to have to do these sacrifices, do these things, suck this up to be able to get that thing. So the first thing I really think is that vision of what you want from work for yourself, not for anybody else. I think the second thing is, I think partly because of the internet and how no one has free time anymore where you have to struggle and figure things out. I think we're becoming less resilient, and the desire and willingness to struggle is really going away. Like the aptitude for struggle is and the aperture for struggle is getting so narrow. And technology is promoting that, right? Like, I didn't have Google when I was growing up. Um, Now you have Chat GPT, which will just do it for you, you know? So, but I also think it's important to honor the struggle and to put yourself in a mindset to to love the struggle. Um, because the struggle is the good stuff. It's where you learn about yourself. It's where you test your mettle. It's where, I have talked about it in the book, which is work is tuition that you get paid for. And that for me is how I chose to think about work, because most of the time I didn't like work. And I was like, all right, I'm just getting tuition. I'm getting paid for it. So I'm getting two payments. Um, and then I think the third thing is it's really easy right now to be apathetic about work because work is happening over Zoom, and Zoom is super impersonal. I don't know about you, but like I get very fatigued if I'm working from home. I have a baseline level of anxiety from being like, does my background look okay? What if somebody's in the office? What am I missing? I look bad. Like, and it makes your home and your work life kind of all one, which I personally think is super unhealthy. But get out of being impersonal. And because that learning that comes from being hands on or with customers or face to face with people is the best kind of learning. It's, in my opinion, the most fulfilling kind of learning. And the last thing is like, I think it's cool not to like work right now. Because everybody's lifestyle looks so good on TikTok or on Instagram. Like when I was growing up, like I watched 30 something, which like, I don't know if you know, 30, like it's the greatest TV show of all time. It was about an ad agency. It's why I wanted to work in advertising. But now people are just looking at the Jenners and Kim Kardashian and her kids in a fur hat and they've got a chihuahua or whatever, and they're in Los Angeles. Like it is reset for yourself that it's cool to care about work, because you still have to do it anyways. So if you care, you probably will get more out of it.
Look, I know this stuff, it's not easy. I think taking ownership of your career when the world feels shaky is, a word, right? When your job feels uncertain or when you're just plain tired, it is a lot. But here's what Erika reminded me, and hopefully reminded you too. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to stop handing your power away. Ask the hard questions. Make time to think. Talk to someone who sees things differently. And most of all, believe that your career is worth building on purpose. No one is going to hand it to you. But you're not just anyone. You showed up today. You're listening. You care. And that means you're already miles ahead of the pack. If you enjoyed this episode, please go out, purchase Erika's book, Nobody Cares About Your Career. It's a brilliant book to have. I really think your survival guide for this time, right now, this moment, this crazy job market, but also for your future. And if you enjoyed this episode, you know what to do. Go share it with 5 friends now. Tell them, yeah, you need to listen to this. Your career will thank you. All right, we'll see you back here in a few days for a brand new episode.